Hello everybody. So today I'm going to be looking at the Russia Gate, Russia hoax, Russia collusion. Was it a hoax? Was it not? So I'm going to actually start this a bit before. So I know we like to start it with Hillary Clinton's emails being hacked in 2016 and then her covering it up. I'm actually going to go back further. I'm going to go back to when WikiLeaks exposed her emails or her cables when she was involved, or she was the main figure that got Australia's Prime Minister Kevin Rudd removed, which happened in about 2009, 2010. So what happened there? Now, Kevin Rudd won the Australian election in record numbers. I believe he was the most popular ever Australian Prime Minister. So we go back to, was it 1901? So we'd had, 107 years to that point. I'm not quite sure how many Prime Ministers, maybe 30, 40. And he was the number one. So he got the biggest margin. He won triumphantly. And then within about a year and a half, he was removed. Halfway through his term. Now we have 3-year terms in Australia, but in Australia we don't have term limits. So we just kind of check to see if people still want them to be Prime Minister every 3 years or so. So you can win 10 terms in a row if you're good. We just have the elections every 3 years or so. And you can call an early election. So Prime Ministers are allowed to call an early election, I believe up to 6 months early. So it's not always the same time of year. So, and also their own party can remove them as Prime Minister. And that's what happened with Kevin Rudd. So on the surface, he was removed in a vote of no confidence by his own party and replaced with his Deputy Prime Minister, whose name was Julia Gillard. Julia Gillard then became Australia's first ever female Prime Minister. And she then also won the next election as well, only to herself be deposed by Kevin Rudd halfway through hers, and then he lost. And then the winner, the Liberal Party, they then did the same thing to their leader, and lots and lots of instability for Australia. And it basically a decade of instability that came from him being deposed. Because it didn't just happen mid-term and he was losing at the opinion polls. He was winning at the opinion polls. He had like 70%. So why would his own party want to remove him when he's winning at the opinion polls with a massive majority guaranteed to win the next election? And that was a really bizarre thing. Now we did have a scandal at about the same time. So Kevin Rudd did a number of things that made Australians happy, one of which was to officially apologise to Australian Aboriginals for stealing their land. Of course, as we know, England conquered Australia, defeated the Aboriginals. There was a war. The Aboriginals lost. And there was no treaty. But, the Aboriginals lost, and then in 1967, I think it was, they got quite a lot of rights, and it was suddenly went from no rights at all, treated as animals, to having so many rights that they had more rights than anyone else, anyone that was not Aboriginal. And so, but they'd never been apologised. And I mean, there's a lot of arguments about that, because do you apologise for defeating another country in war? Do you apologise for invading a country and defeating them? I mean, that's happened all around the world a lot of times over. And you might say, well, the Aboriginals welcomed them in, and it's true, they did. And yeah, it's sort of, I don't think it's such a simple thing as to say, oh, well, that was wrong. I mean, I think you could say that, probably what you could say is, had we really understood it properly at the time, the Aboriginals were quite happy for the English to come in, and there was plenty of room for both. So it's not like the Australia was full. It wasn't full. Had plenty of land, plenty of spare land, and they were happy to have the English come in. So I think that that's where the apology bit comes in, because we could have had Aboriginals and English people living there at the same time. There wasn't really a need to kill anybody. Plenty of land, not that many people, could have all lived together quite happily. And that's where the apology comes in. It's not because they fought a war and lost. It's not even because they were invaded and were conquered. It was more that, well, they were invited in, or welcomed, and then were shot in the face while they were saying, come to my house. So that's my understanding, at least. So he did all that. And he also did the thing where he had insulation for Australian homes. So a lot of homes couldn't afford their own insulation, so in wintertime they'd get cold. So he arranged a scheme where they put fat bats, which is a type of insulation, in the roofs of a lot of houses that didn't have insulation, so a lot of poorer people. And this was great. He was doing this, everyone was happy. He provided this for free. It was on a scheme. He had a number of schemes. He also had he had a scheme where we got $1,000 each for to stop the global financial crisis from hurting us too much, and it worked. We were encouraged to spend that $1,000 on something, that we all did. All bought new TVs. Well, some people bought other things, but so he did all that sort of stuff. But the controversy was that when he arranged the insulation scheme, he got a guy called Peter Garrett to organise it. Now, Peter Garrett had never been a politician before. He was a musician who was the lead singer of a band called Midnight Oil. They were a bit of a political group. He got into the Green Party, not the Labor Party. And then I think he swapped to the Labor Party. Either that or they had some deal where Greens were allied with them. But anyway, so he got control of it. And of course, Peter Garrett had no experience managing that kind of thing, either as a politician or as a businessman. Or he had never been in charge of tradesmen or anything like that. He'd never been a tradesman. So the whole thing was a bit of a disaster. What ended up happening was a number of the tradesmen died. I think we had about 2 or 3, maybe 4 of the tradesmen that were installing these insulations died while doing it. Well, there was a bit of an investigation that found that the trade companies that were doing it were dodgy. So they were corrupt. And Peter Garrett should have known better. He should have known that these ones were no good. They weren't providing adequate training and so forth. So it was a bit more than just bad luck. It was actually a lot of corruption. Now you would think, okay, so we can prosecute the dodgy trades companies. You'd think that would be the focus. We shouldn't be having trades companies that are acting like that. But no, we didn't do that. He said, okay, so you can prosecute Peter Garrett. He should have known better than to hire people who he should have known were dodgy. No, but we went back to Kevin Rudd. And there was a whole lawsuit about it, where they ignored the trade companies who did the wrong thing. They ignored Peter Garrett managing it badly. And they instead said, well, Kevin Rudd shouldn't have let Peter Garrett do it. And look, there is an argument there. Now, the lawsuit did continue, but Kevin Rudd was deposed before the lawsuit finished. The lawsuit ultimately exonerated Kevin Rudd. It said, well, it's not his fault. It said, well, he should have been able to trust his minister. So it's Peter Garrett's fault, but then Peter Garrett should have been able to trust the tradesmen. So it was the tradespeople's fault. It wasn't Kevin Rudd's. And so officially that was why they removed him as leader. Officially, we saw all the media and it said, that's why we removed him, because they feared that he might be criminally prosecuted, because it was a criminal case. Now, he wasn't criminally prosecuted, he was found not guilty. They should have let him back, but of course, in politics, you often are removed while something's pending. So that's what we all thought. That's what everyone thought. They thought, okay, that's what happened. It was pending. Oh, well, it was found not guilty. He can come back now. And he did come back. And he came back and he won election, where he got the confidence against Julia Gillard. Now, then we found out there was a second reason. And the second reason was really surprising, because this was a guy that was massively leading in the polls. He was absolutely smashing the Liberal Party. He was going to win in an absolute landslide. They had the next election, and even if it had gone downhill, he was still going to win by miles. But they said that his own party didn't like him. And there were numerous ministers that went on TV and were interviewed saying, oh no, we just didn't like him. They didn't say why they didn't like him. They just said they didn't like him. And, you know, he's arrogant, whatever. I'm sorry, but that's not how politicians work. Politicians are about popularity. Who you like doesn't matter. You can have a leader that you don't like and you're still going to have him there if he's popular. That's how politicians work. So that never really made any sense, but a lot of people believed it. And then we found out there was a third story, and this was released by WikiLeaks, and it showed that Kevin Rudd was deposed on orders from Barack Obama via Hillary Clinton and the CIA. And we actually had CIA in Australia forcing him to be removed. Now, Kevin Rudd said no. So then they talked to Julia Gillard and essentially said, and other ministers, essentially said, you either get someone else, and they eventually agreed it would have to be Julia Gillard, get them in power, or we will invade Australia. USA were threatening to invade Australia over it. Now, as absurd as that sounds, that was the reality. Now, they were obviously threatening other things less than that as well. And the reason why USA wanted to get rid of Kevin Rudd was because he was becoming too friendly with China. Anyone who looks at his very short term would see that he could speak Mandarin, and he was speaking in Mandarin to Chinese diplomats, and our alliance with China was strengthening. Now, Australia has had a relationship with China since the gold rush in the 1830s, so almost 200 years at this point. Much longer relationship than we've had with USA. And it's also much stronger. It's also mutual. So Australia and China have always sort of regarded each other on reasonably equal footing, while with USA bully us. So most people in Australia, most people in the military want to remove our reliance on USA. We want to have USA as neutral, but not as friends. We don't want to be enemies, but we don't want to be friends with them. But we do want to rely on China because we can trust China a lot more. It might sound weird, but no, we absolutely can. And most of Australia's alliances are fairly mutual. So that was what Hillary Clinton did. It was exposed by WikiLeaks, but didn't really make the news very much. And even Kevin Rudd denied it, in spite of, WikiLeaks being pretty trustworthy. But Hillary Clinton threatened to have Julian Assange killed over it. Essentially, she wanted him brought to USA on charges of treason and to be executed, facing the death penalty. Of course, he's not an American citizen, he's an Australian citizen, but they were going to do it anyway. And in fact, they did later try to do it, and they got very close to doing it. And she tried to shut down WikiLeaks. Now, I think it was Amazon was hosting WikiLeaks' servers, and they were forced to not host them anymore. And then there were other companies that they went to, and they were all told not to host them. So WikiLeaks, there were a lot of people that kept all their website, quite a large website, on their computers, and they kept uploading them. And eventually, the American NSA and whoever else was involved gave up. So WikiLeaks officially aren't supposed to exist. They're banned everywhere, but they're still there. And so in retaliation for all of that, WikiLeaks wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton and expose that it wasn't just Kevin Rudd that she went after. And they knew that she was doing this sort of thing regularly to a lot of people, a lot of countries. Americans didn't care about Kevin Rudd. He's an Australian, who cares? But when it was exposed that it was all over the place, and it was every country, well, perhaps not quite every country, but a lot of other countries, a lot of allies of America, that really resonated with a lot of Americans, and they decided not to vote for her, and she lost the election. And everyone who would say, well, that's why she lost the election. Now, did she lose the election because she was hacked, or because she was engaging in behaviour that was not very good? I mean, the reality is, it wasn't just that she did these things. It was also because what she was doing was perfectly legal and it was as part of her job. But it was more that she was threatening to kill Julian Assange for exposing him. And that was more the issue. Like if she had just shut up about it and hadn't threatened to kill him or have him executed over it, then I think most Americans would have gone, oh well, this is just what Americans do. She's the Secretary of State. Have to keep our allies in check. Have to push them around a bit, and if we make a bit of money on the side, that's okay. And most Americans would have been okay with that. But now let's look at whether that was Russian hacking. Now, Russians weren't angry with her. You know, she hadn't really done anything to Russia. So she wasn't really a target in that sense. She had done stuff to WikiLeaks. They were angry with her, particularly Julian Assange was. So, you know, there was one group that definitely wanted to hurt her. There was another group that didn't. And whether this was disinformation, of course it wasn't. That was never seriously suggested by anyone other than Hillary Clinton. The emails were hacked and they were accurate. And they'd been proven to be accurate. And there was never any serious doubt that they were accurate. Now, that then suggests, so she knew that there wasn't Russia. She knew that it wasn't disinformation. She knew it was accurate. So why did she say it was Russia and why did she say it was disinformation when she knew the whole time it wasn't? Well, it was more about that this hurt the reputation of Democrats and hurt her reputation. She wanted to run for president again in 2024. Of course she didn't. Or sorry, 2020 she did so. And 2024 and probably still wants to. And the Democrats wanted to have power again and they feared that if this dirt stuck, then that might hurt their ability to run for president. They also wanted to undermine Trump's presidency. So, you know, you might say, well, that's legitimate. Your political parties always attacking each other. And that's fair enough. But I mean, if it had just been words, fair enough. But they had a whole investigation into it. And the investigation, of course, didn't prove that Russia hacked them at all. There was no suggestion of that. None of the reports said that. And they never suggested that it was disinformation. Nobody's ever suggested that. But they did prove that Russia were involved in trying to manipulate the election. Now, we didn't know how. There were different things that they did, but not that. But what's come to light recently is how they did it. And it was more, not hacking Hillary Clinton, but hacking other people and trying to have dirt on them. So that was more what it was about. It was a leverage campaign. It was a way to make people attack each other. And they did it to the Trump administration as well. And it was quite well reported that they did it to the Trump administration. They tried to blackmail different people, not Trump himself, but other people connected to him. So that was what they were doing. It was very different to what the media reported. So now that we've got this out there, as I said before, I don't think that what anybody did to do with it was illegal. I think it was in line with running the government. It's probably unethical, but USA is probably not the most ethical country in the world. But yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that there was no Russian collusion. The hacking wasn't by Russia. We knew it. Nobody ever thought it was, and it wasn't. I mean, the emails were accurate. So yeah, we're getting more information about it now, and I think anybody who ever supported her in this should be stopping supporting that. I mean, the current thing is about clearing Trump's name, and I think that is important. I think anybody who's had their name smeared needs to unsmear it as much as they can. He's got the presidency, he should be able to do that. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye-bye now.